hankering for some Elden Ring but don't know your Marika from your Melina? Are you wondering why there's so many fingers everywhere? Or even what an Elden Ring is? Well, we can help break down the world of the lands between and get your tarnished tush varnished up with the story so far. Is varnished up even a saying? Does anything I'm gonna say make sense? I sure hope so. Let's get into it. Let's start with the lands between, the mysterious lands Elden Ring takes place in. Now, you may be asking, what are the lands actually between? Are they between relationships? Between life and death? Well, besides knowing you're between 1,000 different butt kickings, we don't know. Great start to the video, right? Well, buckle up because a lot of Elden Ring lore is unexplained and open to interpretation, so just accept that you aren't gonna get all the answers you want now and prepare to use your imagination. But seriously, the lands between is simply what they're called. There isn't an explicit explanation of them being between anything. I'm sure there's a meaning behind it though, perhaps it's as simple as they're lands that are literally between underground and floating realms. Perhaps it's a reference to more esoteric forces, being a physical land that stands between the supernatural gods and the magic of the cosmos. Or perhaps it's a reference that was born from the split that happened between old and new beliefs when the Greater Will sent its vassal Elden Beast to become the Elden Ring, form the Erd Tree and... Okay, I probably lost you somewhere already, didn't I? Let's rewind a bit. So, before there was ever an Elden Ring or an Erd Tree, the lands between was home to something known as the Primordial Crucible. This is one of those more unknown areas of lore, but my understanding of this time is it's sort of like a primordial era where life was still evolving in the lands between. It's a time where man and beast and different species were all mushed up and indistinct. Like us Earth humans have common ancestors with apes, lands between humans probably have common ancestors with giant jerk lobsters. And they had weird tails and horns and gross growths and other stuff. And they probably all fight in giant crucibles, and whoever won would be a lord. Okay, so one day a god called the Greater Will messed with all of that. The Greater Will is probably like the king of all gods, like Zeus or something. At the very least, the Greater Will is apparently the one responsible for fracturing the One Great, which led to births and souls and sin and curses and everything. Which to me sounds like the Greater Will in this universe basically made the Big Bang happen, so they sound like the boss. It's a theory that the Greater Will is a type of god known as an outer god, as there are of course a whole pantheon of other outer gods with various motivations. Like a god of blood, a god of rot, and a god of flame who is all about chaos and wants to burn everything to return it back to the primal pre-Big Bang oneness, but we don't have time to get into all of that right now. So, back to the Greater Will. This god one day sent a golden star to the lands between, carrying with it a physical vassal of itself, an embodiment of order, the Elden Beast. Now, this beast is the physical form of the Elden Ring, which also makes the Erd Tree. Confused? Me too. It would help to try to understand what the Elden Ring actually is at this point. For starters, it's not even a ring you can wear. It's more of a concept. Although it is also a rune, as well as being a beast and a tree. It's kind of like the laws of the world, like physics. Although it's more helpful to think of the Elden Ring as less of a mathematical understanding of the world and more as a supernatural will of a god. It's also sort of like a divine blessing that can be bestowed upon a special chosen one to make them a god in their own right. Now, along with the Elden Beast, the Greater Will also uses gross giant fingers to send its messages. So these fingers also point to people and say, hey, you're it, and then make them living containers of the outer gods called Empyreans, who are able to one day inherit the Elden Ring. They also grant certain Empyreans with special beasts, known as shadowbound beasts, loyal and fearsome companions. Anyway, at some point, some fingers pointed to someone known as Marika, making her the vessel for the Elden Ring, and a god. I know, you're probably asking why exactly they chose her, but honestly, just stop asking questions, we don't know. Just remember the name Marika, because almost everything that happens from this point leads back to her. So, now that Marika was a god and the chosen of the Elden Ring, she established herself as Queen of the Land and created the Golden Order, basically a religion and government that worshipped the Elden Ring and her. Oh, and she also snapped a bit of the Elden Ring off that controlled death, and gave it to her half-brother, Shadow Beast Malekith, to look after, making herself and any kids she'd have immortal, and basically removing death from the land, which is why you and everyone just respawn all the time. But she of course didn't have any kids to make immortal yet, so she hooked up with a guy called Godfrey and made him the first Elden Lord. All of this, of course, led to a teeny bit of war. Many of the inhabitants of the land between, the giants and dragons and such, did not take too kindly to this new upstart god queen and her consort. Imagine that. But she kicked their butts and reigned supreme for an age, going on to have 3 children. Godwyn the Golden, and the twins Morgott and Moog. But the twins were cursed and had horns and gross stuff like crucible folk, so they were banished. Even so, they were all her kids, so they're still demigods. But now that her and Godfrey had won the war on everything, Godfrey got sad he had nothing left to fight, and Marika got over him moping about the castle and sent him and his mates on their way, banishing them out of the Lands Between to somewhere else. Probably the lands next to the Lands Between. She also took away their grace and said they could have it back if they died. Bit harsh, oh well. And when I say grace, I don't mean like their graceful nature, no. Grace is basically just the blessing of the Erd Tree, which you want, because blessing good, no blessing, very bad. And those who had grace but then lost it are known as tarnished, which is what we are in the game, but we'll circle back to that. With Godfrey out of the way, Marika hooked up with Radagon, making him the second Elden Lord. Like many second marriages, Radagon already had kids, Radahn, Rykard, and Rani, that he'd had with his ex, the Queen Renala of the Carian royal family. But like any stepmom that wants to seem cool to her new stepkids, Marika made them all demigods too. But of course, they had some more kids of their own too for good measure, with the twins Melania and Mikola. That's a lot of names, I know, believe me, I stumbled a few times. But just remember, Marika is the queen/stepmom, Radagon and Godfrey are the dads, and the rest are their kids/stepkids. Now, those fingers had also labelled Rani, Melania, and Mikola as Empyreans. Why they were and the other kids weren't, you ask? We don't know. Okay, now bear with me because things are getting extra weird here. So, one of the big twists in Elden Ring is that Marika is Radagon. Yeah, I know, I just said they got married and they had kids. How can they be the same person? Guess what? We don't know. They just are, but like you'd expect from this situation, the kids born from it had some complications. Melania getting rotting sickness and Mikola being cursed with eternal childhood. So, remember how I said Marika had broken a piece of the Elden Ring that controlled death? Well, like a naughty stepdaughter stealing a 20 from her stepmom's wallet, Rani went and chipped a bit of that death rune off for herself one day. Why? So she could make some sick god-killing knives. So goth, slay goth queen. And slay queen she did, launching the Night of Black Knives, where she used these god-killing knives to kill Marika's firstborn son, Godwyn the Golden, which was the first death of a demigod ever. Why did she do that, you ask? We do know this one. She did that because she didn't like the fingers made her Empyrean, so she wanted to free herself from their fate. But to shed her body and free her spirit, she needed to kill someone else too, because that's just how magic works apparently. But it was a bit of a botched job, as both her and her stepbrother Godwyn died at the same moment, which messed up the special curse mark that was being carved into their flesh. This meant that Rani's body died, but her soul lived on, which put her into a doll. Creepy. While Godwyn's body survived, but his soul perished. Losing her son sent Marika over the edge, so she went and smashed some stuff, including the Elden Ring, which the Greater Will was clearly not super cool with, and locked her up in the Erd Tree for it. But she told her kids to just fight it out amongst themselves for who gets to be the next god if anything like that were to happen, which they did. This fight was known as the Shattering. With the Elden Ring now smashed to bits, each of the kids started fighting for its runes, as it was basically their inheritance money, but they all found themselves pretty evenly matched, leaving no one in charge. All this fighting and the ensuing stalemate led to the Lands Between falling into ruin, and everyone in it becoming super weird, undead, and creepy, and the Greater Will got sick of all the drama. So, he decided to give the grace back to all those tarnished, and invited them to have a crack at becoming Elden Lord themselves. And that's where we come into the picture at the start of the game, where we soon meet Melina, who helps guide us and is also very likely a child of Marika/Radagon, because there's probably a bunch of kids that we don't know about. But anyway, that kind of doesn't matter that much. Anyway, you and the other Tarnished form the Round Table Hold, trying to end the stalemate and find the new Elden Lord. The fingers tell you to basically kill all of Marika's demigod children and gather up their runes and take the throne. But before we can get there, we find the way into the Erd Tree is blocked by thorns. So we ask our local fingers what we should do, and they put in a call to the Greater Will for advice. But our resident finger reader crone said that we're probably going to be on hold for like 10,000 days, so we hung up and decided to just burn the whole Erd Tree down and unleash the death rune so almost everyone was mortal again. So, the Greater Will was a bit annoyed by that, but we find Marika/Radagon caged up in the tree and kill them, then kill the Elden Beast and find ourselves free to become Elden Lord depending on what choices we made in the game. In most outcomes, we basically just become Elden Lord and Marika's third consort. But if you sided with Rani, you get to be her consort. Or if you sided with the creepy Three Fingers, who are the envoy of the Outer God, who you may remember I mentioned wanting to burn everything, then the whole world burns. And that's the story of Elden Ring. So far. See you all in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC.